So I was laying in bed the other night when I started to think about voice adoption in writing and presentation. It's this phenomenon that tons of people have noticed where if you spend a lot of time listening to a distinct speech pattern or reading a distinct style, then you can get into a zone where you think and write and even speak in that voice. Tons of people know about this, but if there's a word for this phenomenon, I have never heard it, and it is nigh impossible to look up. So we're going to call it voice adoption. Except that just runs us into another problem, the word voice. Voice refers to both the physical sound that comes out of a person, that sound's aesthetic qualities, and it refers to the way that individuals or groups use language. And that's kind of weird, right? I mean, this sound coming out of my noise box is very, very different thing from my patterns of word choice, and yet they both use the same word. At the very least, it would appear that voice is maybe the umbrella term and that two related but very distinct ideas are encompassed by it, like you have a sandwich and the sandwich is made out of various ingredients, but in this case the sandwich is voice and we don't have a distinct word for the ingredients. Writer's voice comes close but seems to be struggling with the same lack of a word. It is a phrase that gestures in the direction of the idea, this application of language as opposed to the execution of speaking, and says, you know, that thing with the stuff, when people write, it's obvious that, you know what I'm talking about. So if I want to talk specifically about the one, then I need to spend several paragraphs explaining just what exactly it is that I'm rattling on about in the first place. Sure, we could just make a new word, but have you ever tried to make a new word? It's really hard. See, up above we made a potentially new-ish word by referring to an idea as voice adoption, pulling two existing ideas together to form a new thing. If we were speaking German, then we'd even smash the two together into a single written word without any spaces. But what if there isn't a handy similar word that we can adopt or combine? Well, the next habit is to look to other nearby languages or parent languages and pillage words or parts of speech, and in this specific case we get lucky because it turns out that Latin already roughly differentiated between these ideas with the words sonus to refer to the sound of something and modus to refer to the style or method, which are the component parts of vox or voice. Another common example that you've probably heard before, the English word love encompasses 6 different Greek words: eros, philia, ludus, agape, pragma, and philautia. The last one being further split into the ideas of narcissism and self-esteem. But that's a pretty straight line. English already uses a lot of Greek and Latin word parts. Sonus in sonorant and sonnet, modus is the M in MO, modus operandi, the Greek eros, philia, and pragma, erotic, hydrophilic, and pragmatic. Sometimes, though, you're backed into a corner and need a word for a concept that Greek and Latin don't really deal with. You might get lucky and there's a great word in another language that just fits right into English, like schadenfreude, pleasure derived from the misfortune of others. Or you might get unlucky and there's a perfect word like the Japanese boketo, which is the act of staring vacantly into the distance, but it doesn't quite fit English grammar. He was boketoing? He was boketo? I'm just going to stand here and boketo. Well, let's call that one a half fit. Alright, so why care so much about words? Because words are the way we translate thoughts into communication, and if we don't have a word for something, then it's really hard to talk about it. To illustrate, in English, these boxes are different shades of the same color. However, in Hebrew, Russian, and Italian, they are different colors entirely. We need a word to express a thought, and the words that we have available then feed back and shape the way that we think about things. For a very present example in video games, look no further than arguments about what is and is not a game. While the argument is in many ways protectionist and exclusionist to specific slivers of culture, the existence of the argument belies the fact that game, as a word, lacks the nuance that we conceptually recognize. Like the difference between taco and hoagie, both being types of sandwich, there is something recognizable but difficult to fully describe that differentiates a play for fun and competition and maybe some story game from a play for story and lyrical experience and self-reflection game. So maybe that's the challenge I can leave with you. Dig up, borrow, scrounge, or invent new words for these ideas. If you have any ideas, put them in the comments, but either which way, go in peace, my children. In the name of like, share, and subscribe. Amen.